Everybody, those on Zoom, and those who are here in the center, it's wonderful to see your faces, even though we have to wear our masks. I'm delighted to welcome you to this wonderful tribute. I know you're going to have a great afternoon. It is so important for all of us, particularly those of us like Tabitha who are younger, to remember the legacy and the work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The more we share about it and hold him up as a leader of our country, the more we can learn and grow. So I welcome all of you to this wonderful event. I just wanted to share two of my personal favorite quotes from Dr. King. Faith is taking the first step, even when you can't see the whole staircase. And the other one is, I have decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear. A wonderful man, and we honor his legacy. And now I'm delighted to turn our program over to Kalu Bayash.
Thank you, Judy. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. And welcome. I am Kalu Bayash, a member of RSS, your host. I welcome you to the Riverdale Senior Services celebration in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Some members of the RSS will share their favorite memories, stories, and events, past or present, related to the life of Dr. King. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was born January 15, 1929. He was an important Baptist minister who became a major leader during the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s. To honor him, a federal holiday was signed into law in the United States in 1983 by President Ronald Reagan. In the US, the holiday is observed on the third Monday of January each year. Now, let's start our program. Annie will now share a brief bio of Dr. King, and each speaker preceding Annie has 5 minutes to share his or her memories of Dr. King. Annie?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Annie Jennings, and I've been a member here since 2011. I'm going to share a brief bio of Dr. King. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a Baptist minister, social activist, and civil rights leader who fought against racial injustices in the 1950s and 60s. He was born Michael Luther King on January 15th, 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia, to the Reverend Michael Luther King Sr. and Alberta King. Following a trip to Europe in 1934, King Sr. changed both names to Martin Luther after the German professor of theology and leader of the Protestant Reformation. Educationally, Dr. King attended Booker T. Washington High School and later entered Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia at age 15. He received his bachelor's degree in sociology in 1948. He thrived in his studies and was granted a fellowship for graduate studies at Crozer Theological Seminary in Pennsylvania. There he received a Bachelor of Divinity degree in 1951. Later, he went to Boston and obtained a doctorate in 1955 at age 25. In Boston, Martin met Coretta Scott, a student at the Boston New England Conservatory of Music, where she was an aspiring singer and musician. They married in 1953 and had 4 children. 3 of the children are still alive today. Dr. King's religious career started in 1954 when he became the pastor of the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. As pastor at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, he was well known around the region for his leadership abilities and speaking skills. Nationally, he became the most visible spokesperson and leader of the civil rights movement that began in 1955 with the arrest of Rosa Parks, a Black seamstress who refused to give her her seat on the bus in the first row, the colored section, to a white passenger. Martin then organized the Montgomery, Alabama bus boycott against the policy of racial segregation on the public transit system. The boycott lasted 13 months and cost $3,000 a day. In November of 1956, the US Supreme Court declared that segregation on public buses was unconstitutional and the boycott ended. The success of the boycott led Martin to organize a series of highly publicized campaigns in Alabama, and he became the founder and first president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in 1957. Dedicated to civil rights and nonviolence, they had sit-ins and marches. He taught and replicated the successful strategy and tactics of the Montgomery boycott, inspired by Mahatma Gandhi's teaching in India. Martin continued to espouse nonviolent protests throughout his life, even though he and his supporters were met with brutality, such as fire hoses, police dogs, and police clubs. In 1960, Dr. King returned to Atlanta and became co-pastor of the Ebenezer Baptist Church with his father. He was a prolific writer and published over 17 books and gave hundreds of speeches and sermons in a single year. His influence was felt in the passage of many laws and civil rights activities, such as in 1955, the Montgomery boycott. In 1957, he founded SCLC. In 1963, he organized the March on Washington, where he gave the I Have a Dream speech. In 1964, he won the Nobel Peace Prize at age 35. In 1965, he was instrumental in the passing of the Voting Rights Act. In 1965 also, in Chicago, he worked to end the slums and improve housing. In 1968, he was instrumental in the Fair Housing Act that was passed. And his birthday became a national holiday in 1983. Dr. King was assassinated on April 4th in 1986 at age 39 in Memphis, Tennessee by James Earl Ray. He's buried at Martin Luther King National Historical Park near Ebenezer Baptist Church at his birth home. His gravestone reads, "Thank God Almighty, I'm free at last."
Plus, they felt fast
In 2011, the Martin Luther King Memorial was erected in Washington, D.C., or completed. And in 2016, the exhibits in the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. was opened. In conclusion, the historical significance and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King is felt at RSS today. As we reflect and pay tribute to his many accomplishments in the civil rights movement. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, for such a very, very, very moving tribute to Dr. King. Now we'll hear from Robert Ackerman.
Thank you, Kalu. My name is Robert Ackerson, and I've been a member here since 2008 when I retired. And I'm welcoming you here to this auspicious occasion that we have every year. And on this auspicious occasion, it's appropriate for me to make reference to these three quotes from Dr. King's I Have a Speech Dream. I have a dream speech. I will make reference to you about them. The first one is, and I always remember this one, no, no, we are not satisfied and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. It's from the Bible, King James Version. Next, he talked about all his dreams. This was one of his great dreams. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And my last one from his dream speech has to do with when he dreams that from every mountain, from the ones in the New England, up in the white and green mountains in New England, all the way to the Pacific, shall ring the voice of freedom from every mountain. And he says, and when this happens, when we follow freedom to ring from every mountain, we will let it ring from every village and every hamlet and from each state and every city. And we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, okay, black and white men alike, Jews and Gentiles and Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands once and for all and sing in the words of the great Negro spiritual, free at last. Free at last. God Almighty, we are free at last. And these are the quotes that I remember the most from that speech that are really resonant today and have meaning for us still today in this country that we all hope and love and cherish. Now I will read you one poem from the great Black writer, Maya Angelou, and this is called Caged Bird. And I think you will hear in its message some of the things that I've already talked about and Kalu has already talked about and Annie has already talked about. It's a great poem, and she later wrote a book about it, How the Caged Bird Sings. And this is called Caged Bird by Maya Angelou. A free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends and dips his wing in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. But the bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, and so he opens his throat to sing. But the caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown, but longed for still. And his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds soar through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on a dawn bright lawn, and for names the sky his own. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams. His shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown, but longed for still. And his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. So this is the great Maya Angelou, the great Black poet and writer, and some of the lines of her great poem, The Caged Bird Sings. And I hope you will reflect on these comments by Maya Angelou and Dr. King today on this very special day. But we still haven't finished achieving the great, great dreams that Dr. King tried to achieve. But we're on our way, we're making progress. It's slow, but you got to fight every day. You got to fight for righteousness and justice. You got to fight for freedom. You got to fight for respect and honor and love against all the different hates there are in the world. Thank you very much for attending today, and enjoy your day.
Thank you, Robert, for such an inspiring remembrance. Indeed, the case for still sing. Now we're going to hear from Nareda Colon.
Good afternoon. I'm sorry, good afternoon. My memories of Dr. King when I was young, when he passed away, and then until today, can you hear me? Until today, I still feel him, I still hear his words, and I still follow as much as I can and teach my families and my children how to continue to wish for peace. The poem that I wrote is entitled Believe. And it says, as you see a beautiful sunrise above all earthly things, you must believe that it is a part of me. When the sweet scent of lilacs blooming in the spring brings thee to it, you must believe it is a part of me. On a hot summer day, sweaty and still, sitting down to reminisce with a cold glass of homemade lemon iced tea, you must think and enjoy it and believe you are sharing with me. When a new fallen snow, so soft, pure, and its beauty glistens in the light of the moon, for that moment when the sight takes your breath away, holding that memory of the snowflakes on your lashes and face. Think of snow angels sledding, voices of glee, and a mug of hot cocoa, and enjoying the peace. Just take a moment to feel the warmth of our love and believe it is me. For you see, I am always here in everything you do, touching thee and holding you near. All you have to do is to listen, feel, and most of all, you must truly believe. At difficult times, we tend to forget all that we had and all that we shared. We're blinded by sadness and pain, and we often think, if I could only do it again. At that moment of loss, we forget all our hopes and our dreams and beliefs we were taught from the beginning of time. We erase from our memory all we were taught and how much we are loved and how much life goes on beyond tomorrow and today. So open your eyes and let your heart go to all the fond memories embedded in our souls. Do you see? I am right here each moment of every day until we will be on together again forevermore. All you have to do is really believe. Thank you.
Thank you, Loretta. It's true that we all must continue to believe. Now let us hear from Madeline Gelato.
Hi, I have a personal account of what I experienced from when Martin Luther King was unjustly murdered in 1968. And if I know I told this to you a few years ago, so if some of you didn't hear it, okay. I was in junior high school, 22 in the Bronx, and in mid-afternoon, there were riots that broke out in my school because the news got around very fast that Martin Luther King was assassinated. And the children, everybody, was in trouble. And we were, the African-American students attacked the white students. And I had to African-American friends that took me home that day because they were worried, and the kids that were really went wild attacked them, and it was really a tough day. And I when I came home, I remember my dad saying, well, we were going to go to the movies today, but we can't do it. So we have to put it on hold. There's just tension everywhere. And the next day I went to school and was calmer. And my teacher had us all write condolence letters to Coretta King. And she answered every one of us personally, thanking us. And I really, really wish I had that letter today. I don't know what I do with it, but that was 1968. So anyway, it was, you know, I know the kids didn't get the concept of what Martin Luther King stood for, nonviolence. And I really admired him. He stood for his principles. And you know what they say, history repeats itself, because in 1968, when he was assassinated and there was tensions and riots, and well, that happened through the years when other people were, you know, assassinated unjustly. So I wrote something I didn't write it. I got it from the computer about Martin Luther King. So the King Center. During the less than 13 years of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s leadership of the modern American Civil Rights Movement from December 1955 until April 4th, 1968, African Americans achieved more genuine progress toward racial equality in America than the previous 350 years had produced. Dr. King is widely regarded as America's preeminent advocate of nonviolence and one of the greatest nonviolent leaders in world history. Drawing inspiration from both his Christian faith and the peaceful teachings of Gandhi, Dr. King led a nonviolent movement in the late 1950s and 60s to achieve legal equality for African Americans in the United States. While others were advocating for freedom by any means necessary, including violence, Martin Luther King Jr. used the power of words and acts of nonviolent resistance, such as protests, grassroots organizing, and civil disobedience to achieve seemingly impossible goals. He went on to lead similar campaigns against poverty and international conflict, always maintaining fidelity to his principles that men and women everywhere worldwide. He is the only non-president to have a national holiday dedicated in his honor, and is the only non-president memorialized on the Great Mall in the nation's capital. He is memorialized in hundreds of statues, parks, streets, squares, churches, and other public facilities around the world as a leader whose teachings are increasingly relevant to the progress of humankind. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. I guess as a teenager, it must have been a scary time for you. And it's possible that with all the fright, you probably just, that paper, the letter, you probably put it someplace and that right here didn't remind you of where it was. But it's good to have such lovely memory. We're going to now hear from Diane Sargent. Okay, so let's hear from Janice. Or Janice Malone.
You know,
wonderful. Martin Luther King was assassinated in 1968, which means that you and I, except for you, were contemporaries of him. So he was a living person who was on the news. Some of us saw him or met him or knew people who did. It was very different from the people who came after, like my daughter and the millennials, for whom he is an ancestor. An ancestor is kind of special. Well, everybody behind us are ancestors, but we think of our ancestors as the people who left us a legacy that we remember and can live by. When my father died, a woman came to me and she said, make your life a testimony to his teachings. That stunned me. I couldn't go willy-nilly anywhere anymore. For my daughter, as we taught her, Martin Luther King is an ancestor who was a prototype to be emulated. And how to emulate? Well, first of all, he put into effect the idea of civil disobedience without violence. He and Mahatma Gandhi, two of them to emulate. And what I think I want to take a moment to talk about is how each one of us, and I think you probably do, probably every day, do something, maybe not thinking about the memory of Martin Luther King, but have to do with his legacy. Every time you donate, don't hit anybody, right? First, do no harm. Pick up the garbage, help somebody out. Whatever you do, put your hand out. It's not enough. What he would be proud of. And one thing that is kind of difficult is when you're going about and you're helping out as you can, when you can, you'll see other people who don't. That's a big problem. First, do no harm. I'd like to also say, first, do no harm to yourself. But trying to do things in as peaceful, in as civil a way that you can, multiply it by hundreds of thousands of miracles of millions of people, and we'll be there. Each person is an individual and is sacred. And each time you, who are sacred, reaches your hand out to another person, it's a miracle, and it's beautiful, and we need it. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice, and we all will remember to reach out and touch someone in that loving memory of Dr. King. Now, Annie is going to come and present a few words on behalf of Kevin, who works in the kitchen. So, Annie.
This is your last chance to come forward and present. Your last chance. Okay.
Thank you. All right, I'll stand next.
You can really say
I can't see. I ain't got my glasses.
Okay.
I got my
You don't
glasses.
have to read. It comes from your heart. But Kevin, let me just say that this program, 90% of it was inspired and suggested by Kevin. Yes. At one of the staff meetings. But what he shared with us was his family tree, and that was done in 2007 by a family member when they had a family reunion. And this is the Rainey Brown Donovan family. And as we all know, what they did was through DNA results with Ancestry.com, they researched the family, and he has this wonderful document that was presented to everyone who attended the reunion in 2019. So I wasn't sure who Kevin was, and I guess I learned yesterday because my assumptions about who he was and his background was totally different. But from his family tree, they come from 38% from the Cameroon, Congo, 18% from Togo, 11% from Mali, 11% from Great Britain, 10% from the Ivory Coast, 9% was Ireland, Scotland, Wales, 2% from Germany, and 1% from Norway. So you wonder when he has to fill out, you know, that ethnicity thing.
Keep it safe.
So he just shared with us, and some of you might have used 23andMe as your ancestry tool also, but he just shared just a wonderful history of how his family just went from all these countries, how his family was in the South. So he's a combination of all of us here. And as we celebrate this day today, it means we have to come together as a family, and this is what Kevin has. He is a true family, and everybody here is his relative.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Indeed, we are all family of different nationalities, complexion, size, and everything. Look at me. Everybody think I'm from North Carolina, but in fact, I am from Liberia, West Africa. And I recall very well on that day when Martin Luther King was killed, we were in class. And suddenly I went to an all-girls school, and they were on the top of the hill, about a couple of miles away, but I don't know how quickly they got down to us and were further south, and told us we had to all run to the American Embassy, and the American Embassy was closer to us, about 2 miles away. And we all ran to the American Embassy and stood there and started chanting, and that's all we did. We never saw this man before. I don't recall ever seeing him in pictures because we didn't have the luxury of television, but we had the luxury of radio. But we all, in unity with the American people, went to the American Embassy to express our sympathy to the people of America, okay? And lo and behold, I was able to personally see Mrs. King in Georgia in one of the celebrations that we were. So again, we all are one family, irrespective of where we come from. We all have that commonality as human beings on this planet Earth. I'd like to now say that on behalf of the MFK committee, I thank Annie, Robert, Narita, Madeline, Janice, and Kevin. Our SS staff, the kitchen staff, and also all of you who are here and those of you watching on Zoom. Without you, this would not have been possible. And I'd like to add, the lunch was delicious. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Barbara, okay, has made it possible for us to have hiring. Thank God for technology.
Yes.
Thank you. And now please sit back and watch the video of I Have a Dream, speech given on August 28, 1963 at the renowned Washington Mall, Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very nice.
Thank you.
I have the pleasure to present to you Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
Happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. Five score years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. This nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification. One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted. And every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning, "My country, tears of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. And so let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghanies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. Not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring, and when this happens, when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics will be able to join hands and sing in the way.